Good evening. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Board of Education. We had no closed session this evening, so we're beginning our meeting here just a couple minutes after 7:30. Mrs. Walsh, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Conroy?
Here.
Mrs. Droney?
Here.
Mr. Collins?
Here.
Mr. Kalquist?
Present.
Mrs. Ostajic?
Here.
Mrs. Hirsch is absent. Mrs. Davy?
Present. Thank you. 6 board members present, 1 is absent. Please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our first item on our agenda is student recognition. We have a full crowd tonight, and we're pleased to be able to recognize students from the Illinois Music Educators Association Junior Division selectees. Dr. Krizik, would you like to give an introduction?
Thank you, Mrs. Ostajic. Tonight we're here to celebrate the 30 of our middle school students who had the honor and distinction of representing Elmhurst District 205 at the recent District 1 Music Festival at Lincoln Way North High School. In order to give you more of an overview of the achievements of our 30 middle school students representing all 3 of our middle schools, I'd like to introduce the elementary and middle school music and band coordinator, Mr. Brian Berg.
Good evening, members of the board, district staff, and Elmhurst community. On behalf of the Elmhurst Community Unit School District 205 6-8 music staff, it is my honor and privilege to introduce our Illinois Music Educators Association Junior Festival participants for the 2010-2011 school year. Our department, who includes Ellen Gary, Jessica Cross, Ricardo Vasquez, Heather Knight, Tara Blocky, Stephanie Faraci, John Gaunt, Cindy Krause, Barbara Scott, Lindsay Sickinger, and myself, Brian Berg, are very proud of these students, and we're happy to announce their names tonight. Each year, the Illinois Music Educators Association hosts the Junior Festival event for middle school students who excel in woodwinds, brass, percussion, and string instruments, and voice. Students audition to participate in the festival band, orchestra, choir, or jazz band. Selected students then spend the morning and afternoon rehearsing together in one of these 4 ensembles under the direction of a distinguished conductor and clinician, and then present a joint concert in the afternoon. Similar IMEA junior festivals are held in 9 separate geographical regions of the state. Hundreds of students from across the Southwest, Chicago to Joliet region auditioned in early October for the opportunity to perform in the IMEA District 1 Junior Festival, which was held Saturday, November 6, 2010 at Lincoln Way North High School in Frankfort, Illinois. The 3 ensembles presented an outstanding joint performance in the early evening for a capacity audience in the field house. I'm very proud to present the Elmhurst 205 students who were selected to the IMEA Region 1 Junior Festival Honor Band, Orchestra, Choir, and Jazz Band. From Bryan Middle School, and if the students could come up here and stand when I read your name, Spencer Cost, Kimmy DeToli, Emily Debian, Honor Band, Maddie Fabry, Lauren Irby, Sydney Meyer, Wes Nelson, and Maddie Wallinga, Orchestra, Jordan Ciccaroni, and Haley Goulding, Choir. From Sandburg Middle School, I missed one from Brian, Jazz Band, Wes Nelson. From Sandburg Middle School, Lauren Anderson, Henry Brown, Lauren Gaynor, Jack Gergetz, Madison Knight, Connor Lockey, Allison Meyer, Daniel Stumpf, Elise Tron, Leah Young, Band, Elizabeth Pronave, Orchestra, Emily Patterson, Clara Stokowski, Choir. From Churchville Middle School, Noah Wagner and William Whitstock, Band, Jenny Edwards, Orchestra, Emily Drost Jessica Hines, Colette Obermeyer, choir, and Ian Elliott, Noah Wagner, jazz band.
Thank you. And on behalf of the Board of Education, we would like to express our pride in all of the students here. The Illinois Music Educators Association has a mission to promote lifelong music learning and to provide leadership for music education. And the performance that these students were involved in is designed specifically for middle school students. There were over 3,000 students that auditioned for this, and these are some of the 500 students from across the state that were selected. So we're extremely proud of you. As a district, we're proud that we're able to offer a music program that includes the choir as well as the band and the orchestra, and it progresses all the way up through the high school level. But the level that you students have taken it to has shown a very deep commitment, additional time outside of school. I'm sure many of you are working with private tutors and additional instruction, and of course the support of your family. So you should be very proud, and we are very proud of you. And with that, I would like to read a proclamation. Whereas, first I'm going to say I apologize. I'm not very good with names, so if I don't get your name right, we do recognize you, and I'm just going to give that disclaimer up front. Whereas the Illinois Music Educators Association Junior Festival recognizes middle school students for their accomplishments, and whereas this program encourages excellence on the part of individual students and encourages further music study and artistry, and whereas the Bryan Middle School students, Jordan Cicerone in tenor, Kimberly DeToli trombone, Emily Debian flute, Madeline Fabry viola, Haley Goulding alto, Lauren Irby violin, Spencer Cost trumpet, Sydney Meyer cello, Wesley Nelson bass, Madison Walenga violin. And whereas the Churchville Middle School students, Emily Dross, soprano, Jennifer Edwards, cello, Ian Elliott, piano, Jessica Hines, alto, Colette Obermeyer, soprano, Noah Wagner, trumpet, William Whitstock, French horn. And whereas the Sandburg Middle School students, Lauren Anderson, bassoon, Henry Braun, baritone sax, Lauren Gaynor, flute, Jack Gergitz, trumpet, Madison Knight, clarinet, Connor Lockey, tuba, Allison Meyer, flute, Emily Patterson, soprano, Elizabeth Pronovi, cello, Clara Stazowski, soprano, Daniel Stumpf, trombone, Elise Tran, clarinet, and Leah Young, French horn, were selected to play in an honor ensemble along with some of the most accomplished student musicians in the region. And whereas these accomplishments bring pride and prestige to Bryan, Churchville, and Sandburg Middle Schools, and to the community, therefore, and to District 205, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education and Administration of Elmhurst Community School District 205 express our congratulations to these students and teachers for this outstanding accomplishment. Congratulations. Congratulations to all of the middle school staff. Thank you again to the students and your families and teaching staff that have come out to join us tonight. We typically would take a break right now and allow you the opportunity to go home and work on homework or whatever you need to do. If you'd like to stay for the meeting, you're always welcome to. We have a very interesting discussion on our social studies curriculum, so all are welcome to stay for that. But absent that, you can feel free to leave now. Thank you. Okay, thank you for that break. So, Dr. Krizik, are there any other items on student performance we'd like to discuss?
Just this week, we learned that the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, or ISAC, recently recognized 17,335 students from 749 different high schools from across the state as the 2011 through 2012 Illinois State Scholars. The Illinois State Scholar winners rank in the top 10% of high school seniors, and selection is based on ACT, SAT, and or the Prairie State Achievement exams. Actually, it would be the 10-11 Illinois State Scholars, and or class rank at the end of the junior year. We learned that we had 117 York seniors honored as Illinois State Scholars out of a class of 648. So it is with great pride that we have so many students representing York High School for their academic achievement on multiple measures. So I just want to share that with you this evening about the academic achievement of 117 of our current York seniors.
So those are this year's seniors?
Do these kids this year's seniors, so they would be the 10-11 Illinois State. They're the 11-12?
They are state scholars going off to college for next year.
Okay, they're the class of 2011, and they are next year's scholars. Okay. There's still 117 of them. That hasn't changed.
Thank you. We're happy to hear that news. So some great news on both of the study of the arts and academic performance of our students tonight. We don't have any individuals that have signed up for public comment, so we can move ahead to the superintendent's communication. Our first item is the social studies curriculum presentation. Dr. Krizik.
And I'd like to allow Dr. Sullivan to make the introductions of the administrative staff that will be making tonight's presentation.
You get a dynamic duo tonight. You get Teresa Ulrich, our K-12 social studies coordinator, who also is our ELL bilingual coordinator, and you get Charles Avando, the York social studies department chair. They're going to tag team to share the results of the study that they've been working on for a good portion of last year and up to this point this year. So we'll let Teresa start.
Okay, good evening. Is that better? Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for allowing us to come here tonight and present our social studies report to you. As Dr. Sullivan mentioned, it's actually been a bit of a journey for us. A lot of the work that is in this report started about a year and a half ago. Including at that time we had social studies specialists, and a lot of that work in that 2009-2010 school year was done just defining what is the social studies curriculum, especially at the elementary level. Work continued in the summer and through the fall of this year with staff who were interested in developing social studies curriculum, so this report is a result of our findings. The purpose of this presentation is to review the current state of District 205 social studies curriculum. The review of social studies aligns with Strategic Plan Research and Assessment Goal 1.2. The previous social studies study was performed more than 10 years ago, as you can see by that date up there. In the course of compiling information for this report, the following areas were reviewed: curriculum, grades kindergarten through 12, surveys about the curriculum, including students from grades 3 through 12, parents of all levels, and staff of all levels, A comparison of state and national standards was performed, and a review of current Common Core standards was reviewed. We also looked at best practice instruction and learning in the field of social studies. While reviewing the current curriculum, specific focus was given towards assessing its strengths and deficiencies. We reviewed the age of adopted texts and materials, what kinds of supports were available for the curriculum, how much technology is currently integrated, how well curriculum aligned vertically and horizontally, how much literacy is integrated into the curriculum, and what common assessments currently exist. In curriculum grades kindergarten to 8, the following observations were made of components that we reviewed. Green indicates strong evidence of the indicated components. Yellow indicates minimal evidence, and red indicates non-existence. So from this graphic display, we can see that there is a room for improving our current curriculum for social studies. In addition, the district has no method available for tracking student achievement in the area of social studies for grades kindergarten through 8. We do not have any local or common assessments through the district. And as most of us know, social studies has not been assessed by the state in the last few years. So we don't have any state data to look at either. However, as you know, we do have a strategic plan in place, and embedded in that plan is a curriculum review cycle, so we know automatically social studies will now reviewed a minimum of every 5 years. But in addition to that, the district has initiated a professional learning community model, and one of the inherent outcomes of using this model is regular discussions and review of curriculum. So we can be assured that social studies curriculum will not be neglected in the future. One positive discovery of the study is that we see a lot of integration of social studies and literacy with our newly adopted literacy curriculum. In fact, we can find a number of places where social studies content can be found in this literacy curriculum. And just as an example, looking at the Reading Street curriculum, 3rd grade, there are some examples of titles that appear in that grade level in the various units. And as you can see, all of them are social studies related. Knowing this, we want to take the opportunity to maximize instructional time. So we're hoping as we begin to develop curriculum, we can find ways to deliver instruction in both literacy and social studies simultaneously without sacrificing any of the instructional time currently devoted to literacy. At this point, I'd like to introduce Charles Ovando, and he's going to be talking a few moments about the state of the current high school curriculum in social studies.
Thank you, Teresa. Good evening. When we think about curriculum, in this case social studies from the K through 12 years, we inevitably talk about transitions. Transitions, of course, from level to level to ensure that what students are learning at each level prepares them for the next one. At the high school level, it's no different. We think about transitions, except in this case, what's unique is we're talking about a transition out of our system for the first time. And we're also talking about students who are leaving and becoming legally and socially adults. So at the high school level, in social studies, we think about both the transition to the undergraduate world, given that the very large majority of our students go on to some level of college, 2-year or 4-year colleges. And we're also thinking about the transition to the world of work. We keep 3 things in mind when we think about what our social studies offerings, both the required courses and the elective courses. We think of 3 things in terms of driving the curriculum in those courses. One is, of course, preparedness for the 21st century world. And there's a lot we could say about this. We talk about being in an information age, and we talk about there being a lot of information. We talk about several ways in which that information now is transmitted. But what I think is unique right now in terms of all of the disciplines, not just social studies, is that information and knowledge in the disciplines is increasingly becoming interdisciplinary. So when we talk about discrete areas of social studies, they don't exist alone anymore. And so connectedness with other disciplines outside of social studies becomes increasingly important. We also, of course, think about citizenship. And given that we are a public institution that is created and sustained by a democratic process, I would argue that we have a duty, an obligation to make sure that our students, as they graduate and leave District 205, that they are informed, engaged, and judicious citizens. Of course, scholarship is an important component. And specifically, we're thinking about our students and are they leaving York High School, prepared in social studies, with the academic skills that they need to be successful at the undergraduate level. And of course, we're talking about skills like thinking, skills, writing, reading, research, and I'll talk in a few minutes about ways in which we try to ensure that this is something that they are prepared. One thing that I think is very important to point out here is the U.S. Department of Education, of course, collects a lot of statistics, more than we would probably want to discuss tonight. But one piece of data really stood out to me recently, and that is, as of 2008, 1 out of every 5 of the 1.5 million degrees granted in undergraduate institutions, 1 out of every 5 degrees is a social studies related degree. Now that is significant because it's tied, or virtually tied, for first place. 21% of degrees at the undergraduate level right now are business degrees. 20% are in social studies related fields. 19% are in science related fields. So as social studies teachers at the high school level, as a department, we're really concerned about 2 significant things. One is, are our students leaving the high school prepared to be successful in general in college? And secondly, we're also looking at our classes thinking that there's a strong likelihood that 1 or maybe 2 out of every 5 of our students are going to be either majoring or minoring in a social studies related field. When we talk about where we are right now at the high school in social studies, it's worth looking at where we have been and where we have come in the last 5 years. 6 years ago, we did not have core course requirements that were organized in a fashion that was conducive to vertical alignment and articulation. We also offered no AP courses. And that was an anomaly, not just for suburban high schools. It's an anomaly, I would argue, for any high school at the national and, of course, the state level. Starting in 2005, 2 significant things happened. And at the time, I believe the department chair was Jeff Howard. He had just come to the district. And there's 2 immediate things that changed. One was we looked at and reviewed our core course requirements and where they were sequenced in the 4 years of high school. And we created a sequence where we had a full-year freshman level course that became foundational in terms of content, foundational content knowledge, as well as foundational in terms of social studies skills development. We then transferred a senior level government class to the sophomore level so we could build on that freshman year, and then we culminated in a required full-year U.S. history class. This type of sequencing allows us to significantly, or create a significant way to sequence skill development in terms of writing and reading and research skills. And right now with the Common Core standards, this type of sequence is highly conducive to incorporating them easily and seamlessly. We also began in 2005 offering 2 AP courses for the first time, immediately jumped to an enrollment of around 171 students. And just last year, we offered a total of 6 AP courses, more than, I believe, any other department in the building. Now, some of that is reflective of the fact that there are more social science AP offerings just in general by the College Board. A couple things to mention about AP enrollment and AP performance. Our performance in terms of what students are, in terms of the pass rates of students, is really high. When we take all of the 310 or 311 AP exams taken last year in the social studies, the pass rate is 94%. That is very high, and it's a testament to our students who work very, very hard, who are conscientious, who are intelligent. It's also a testament to our teachers in the whole department, but our AP teachers who are very committed to student success and who spend a lot of time in terms of professional development and being members of professional organizations. In a little bit, I'll talk about where we want to head and some of the things that we anticipate in terms of increasing enrollment and what that means for our pass rates. We've mentioned a little bit about PLC development. Our collaborative teams, because we have resequenced our courses, our collaborative teams have mostly focused on curriculum. We hope to see that shift a little bit into spending more time looking at student work, student data, and trying to spend time discussing as teachers the areas in which we can share instructional ideas to help students in areas that we've identified as areas of growth. We also continue to offer very robust elective and diverse elective offerings for our students. This is a very quick graph. I could show you graph after graph of AP data. This one is significant. It shows us how our students perform compared to national means. Our students perform very, very well. You can see in one case we have a 100% pass rate in AP Government as of last year. AP Macro and Microeconomics are also very high. We're talking about pass rates anywhere from 88% to 100% in our 6 AP electives. Where we want to head in the next 5 years. One is we, of course, want to solidify and increase the amount of alignment that we see in both vertically and horizontally at the high school level, but also provide meaningful connections with the middle schools to ensure that we're creating strong ties there. We want to increase our AP enrollment, and that is something that's bigger than just the social studies department. It's something that we believe helps benefit an entire building and a district in terms of raising achievement for students. This means a couple of things. When I look at our pass rates, it's not surprising because the students who are taking these classes, for the most part, are students who have been very successful in school already, not just at the high school level, but in middle school and elementary school. We would expect that with the quality of teachers we have teaching our AP courses and in our department, and the quality of the students, that we would have pass rates as high as 94%. As we talk about increasing that enrollment, we're talking about targeting a population of students who may or may not have seriously considered that they are prepared to or could be able to be successful in an AP course. As some evidence of this, I've taken the mean GPA, cumulative GPA, of our AP US History students. So these are our students who have been in the school for 2 years in terms of having a cumulative GPA. And their mean GPA is 4.1. When we look at the US History course, the non-AP course, same level, juniors, their mean GPA, cumulative GPA, is 3.1. So when we talk about increasing enrollment, I would argue that it is probably a very effective way to raise achievement overall, because we're finding and bringing in those kids who need that challenge and who could probably be successful in these classes, but either don't have the self-confidence or never have been approached in a systematic fashion in terms of trying to bring them into these courses and helping them succeed. This would also mean that we would need to have some structural and infrastructural supports, both for teachers in terms of professional development and also infrastructural support for these students who will be challenged in these classes and will need to know that there are places they can go and teachers they can reach out to in order to get the study skill development they may need to be successful. The remainder of bullets just address other areas that we want to focus on, transitioning to, as I mentioned before, looking at student data in terms of student achievement in our teams. We also want to continue to review and maintain our robust elective offerings, and we also want to continue to build on and increase the civic ties we have to our community. If there are questions later, I'll be happy to address them.
Thank you, Charles. One of our components that we reviewed in putting together the study was looking at data from some surveys. And unfortunately, I wish I could say that we had 100% response from all of the students at all levels, all parents and all staff members. So in some cases, our responses are from limited samples. But I did want to just show you a couple of overviews, sort of to give you a snapshot of perception of the social studies curriculum from the stakeholder perspective. In this particular example, students responded to a statement, "I like social studies." And when you see the first two graphs or bars, we are representing grades 3 through 5, and middle school, and well over 70% of those students indicated that they do like social studies. Keeping in mind that we did have a limited sample, we see the response dip at high school level, but still well over 50% indicated that they do like social studies. In considering the teachers, the statement they responded to that we're using as an example here is that social studies is important. And you can see very easily across all levels that all of our teachers in the district who responded find social studies to be valuable. And in fact, at the middle school and high school levels, 100% of all the respondents felt that social studies was important. Finally, when we look at the parent responses, the statement that we are representing here is, my student is receiving a good social studies education. And not surprisingly, we see a little under 50% indicating that they agree with that for grades kindergarten through 5. And we found similar findings that we do have work to do in that area, and that's something that we are going to be addressing. But when we get to middle school and high school, that a percentage jumps to over 60% for each of those levels. So there is a good amount of parent satisfaction, but of course we do have some work to do. After reviewing curriculum, surveys, standards, best practice, some themes became evident. Social studies should be interactive and include opportunities for projects, activities, and use of technology. Social studies should go beyond the textbook and incorporate more literacy. Social studies should develop critical thinking. Methods to maximize instructional time should be explored. The curriculum should also include common assessments and be aligned vertically and horizontally. And very important, social studies requires up-to-date materials. And just to expand on that for a moment, I want to review with you the age of some of our texts at various levels. In grades kindergarten through 2, the age of the texts ranges between 5 and 13 years old. In grades 3 through 5, texts ages range between 5 and 8 years old. In middle school, texts are 7 years old, and in fact, we can no longer get teachers' editions because they are out of print. Based on these findings, the following recommendations are being made. Number 1, find ways to adjust instructional time, especially at the elementary level, so that social studies will become a regular integrated part of the curriculum. Number 2, the curriculum and accompanying components should be updated and accessible to the modern student. Number 3, begin development of power standards, which will provide consistent guidance for content and instruction at all grade levels. Number 4, promote the district's direction in the development of professional learning communities to establish consistent alignment and assessments to monitor student achievement and guide decisions for instruction. And number 5, while promoting enrollment for advanced placement courses, plans to prepare and support students for these classes should also be developed. Based on these recommendations, here are our next steps. We need to begin development of power standards at each grade level, which are aligned with national and Common Core standards, and where possible, with literacy that's already established in the district. We need to develop a curriculum map that aligns from grades K through 12. As Charles mentioned, high school is making good gains in developing social studies. We need to also make those gains in the elementary and middle school levels and make a connection between those levels. We also need to develop proficiency scales that aligned with the newly developed power standards. We need to develop assessments to monitor achievement, reflect on instructional techniques, and gauge need for curriculum updates. And finally, we need to begin the first stages of text adoptions, keeping in mind that we will need to start with middle school first because, as I mentioned, we cannot get those teachers' editions for our teachers anymore. Okay. This concludes our presentation, so we're ready to take any questions that you may have.
Mr. Vondo and Ms. Ulrich, thank you very much for the time and to the entire team. You did a nice job of synthesizing a lot of information in a short PowerPoint presentation. Are there any board members' questions? Mr. Collins.
I have a few.
Okay.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you. This is a great study. It was thorough. It was well articulated. And thank you for integrating and embracing the PLC model in it. And I have to say, the most interesting statistic that I found in your study, and thank you for using surveys, because I think we need to ask our customers what they think, that 55% of high school students checked agree or strongly agree that they like social studies. But 80% of the teachers predicted that their kids like social studies.
Right.
I thought that was a very interesting statistic. Charles stole quite a few of my questions here and answered them as we went through.
Oh, wonderful.
But I would like to investigate. One thing I wrote on my paper here is your AP pass rates are too high. And Charles, you exactly addressed the reason I wrote that down. What is your plan to attract more kids to take an AP classes in social studies?
Well, there are a few things. I think immediately, one thing we've done already for next year is we have extended the offering of AP U.S. Government and Politics to the sophomore year. Why that's significant is because right now American government as a graduation requirement exists at the sophomore level, and AP government is not offered until the junior year. By bringing it down to the sophomore year, we're allowing it to also satisfy that American government requirement. So I think automatically there are going to be students who, given that choice, American government or AP government, will feel like a better fit for them is government. I would anticipate that our enrollment or the number of sections we have in AP government will grow from 1 this year, because it's treated as an elective, to anywhere from 3 to 6. So there are some immediate structural things like that are going to increase enrollment.
Okay.
I think another piece to this is providing the supports that I mentioned. We have proposed, and I think it's come before the board already, a pre-AP summer offering. And the intention of this course is to expose students. Primarily, we're targeting freshmen who are incoming sophomores for the next year. We want to expose students not necessarily to the content. It's not intended to supplement the content of our courses, but it's intended to expose them to what these courses are like, how they are sequenced, the kind of reading and writing and discussion skills that these courses demand. I think as some of the mystery of the courses disappear, more students will feel like this is something that they can jump into and be successful in. I think there's also a bit of a mythology about the AP courses that exists both perhaps at the teacher level as well as the student level, that it's something that I have to be a certain kind of student who has, I need to have had a lot of experience in honors courses, or I can't just take one AP course, I need to take 6 of them. As we break that down, I would say if a student goes to York High School and takes one AP course, that's success. Because I think right now we have too many students in our AP courses who are people who take multiple AP or honors courses, and not enough of them who are taking just 1 or 2. So some of this is a cultural shift, it's a mindset shift. Some of it, I think there are some structural things we can do to make it more accessible.
Okay. And just if I can explain my question and what we're talking about here is in terms of your pass rates being too high, the whole idea here, as you embrace, is to introduce more kids to AP classes, college-level rigor, while they have the support structure in place at York High School. because they're going to graduate, and a very high percentage go on to college. And in college, that support structure just doesn't exist.
Right.
So why not expose a kid to college-level rigor in high school? I was fortunate to spend a day last month at Stevenson High School, and they approached this about 5 years ago. Currently, our number of kids that we have that take at least one AP class before they graduate is 53%. I think we established at our last meeting. That was Stevenson had 55% of their kids 5 years ago enrolled in AP classes, taking at least one AP class before they graduated. Our pass rate's 87%. Their pass rate was 90%. Well, their school board told them, our goal is for you to have 100% of your kids take at least one AP class before they graduate. So Stevenson has worked hard. They embrace that next level of kids that you talked about. And their percentage of kids taking at least one AP class before they graduate is now up to 85%. Their pass rate dropped from 90 to 87%. It's an impressive job they're doing, and I think I'm with you. I think we can replicate it. My next question then is, what do we need to do to improve vertical articulation from K through 12 in social studies?
One of the things we're going to be focusing on starting at the middle school level, since that is where we're going to start looking at a text adoption first, is beginning that writing of power standards. But as these teachers begin doing this, they're not going to be doing it in isolation from each other and levels. At a certain point, when the teachers feel that they have a draft, we'll be inviting, for example, the 9th grade world language teachers to work with the 6th grade teachers who are teaching that world history course in 6th grade. And the same is true, for example, in 6th grade, with 5th grade, and working with those 7th and 8th grade groups. But as we're writing standards, we will be working in large groups, for example, K through 5, so there will be that natural discussion, that professional learning community idea that as groups work individually, they will also have opportunities to display and show each other work that they've done and start having discussions about what is a more appropriate placement for some topics. And we've already begun some of this. For example, we've had 7th and 8th grade social studies teachers meet with some of the 5th grade teachers because there seems to be a lot of overlap between those levels. In addition, there are some content that 5th grade teachers have in their curriculum now that they don't feel is quite age appropriate, and we're talking about things like genocide and the Holocaust, and they're thinking maybe that should be something just touched upon maybe in 5th grade, and they'll get more of a complete study of that in 7th and 8th grade. So these discussions are already beginning to happen, but as we go full force in developing our power standards, naturally conversations are going to happen. It's already happening. Teachers are saying, when are we going to get a chance to talk with the high school? When are we going to get a chance to talk with the teachers in this grade? Because I think we're teaching some of the same things here. Maybe we shouldn't spend as much time. So it is happening. There's a desire for it to happen, and it's an intentional plan that it will continue to happen.
You guys have done a really nice job with that articulation, the alignment, the standards that you're setting. This is a rhetorical question, but how do we encourage other departments to do the same thing? And I'm not going to ask you to answer that, but that's very much something I'd be very interested in promoting among the other departments. And I'm almost done with my questions here. You said in your study that there are some national standards that are starting to be developed, and you don't know when they're coming out.
Exactly.
Now, we do curriculum reviews and curriculum changes typically once every 5 years.
Yes.
What happens what's your plan for when those new national standards come out? between now and 5 years from now?
Well, we've actually thought about that. The organization, the National Council for the Social Studies, which is the revered organization recognized in the country who has written these standards, is actually the lead promoter of developing the common standards across the country. And they are actually in the process of soliciting other organizations of social studies related content. And because they are a revered leader in social studies, we can only suspect that the standards that they have already written and so many of us follow are going to greatly impact that common core national standards that are being developed. In other words, I think we're going to see work that's already been done reappear in a very similar form, if not the same form. So if we can follow their lead, I don't think we're going to be thrown much off course, if we are thrown off course at all, if we follow the lead of the NCSS.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, Teresa, Charles, you've done a very nice job. I'm very glad you're here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Deroni.
Thank you from me as well. I had a question about in the detail of your report, you talk about curriculum writing and textbook adoption, and I'm just curious, what's the relationship to that? It looked to me as though maybe those were going to be done at different times. Which one comes first? How do you make sure
Well, in that
together?
case with curriculum writing and textbook adoption, I should say for us in this case, because of our situation, they're going to almost happen simultaneously. We are going to be looking at different vendors, different publishers, while we're in the process of drafting power standards, but in that way, we can have a better idea of what text is going to best meet our needs, because we are already setting a direction, whether it's finalized or not. Ideally, we would like to have the power standards done already, but it's just a matter of timing and how things have worked out. But we're already making plans for Institute Day, and the middle school department chairs are prepared to start having vendors come in. We're having conversations about texts, and we're beginning to write our power standards at the middle school level.
Let me jump in. My understanding is that the way the process works in terms of curriculum writing at the high school level probably varies somewhat, and some of that's just the nature of the different levels. I would say for the high school that it's very important that the curriculum process happen first, and that the curriculum drives the search for the types of resources, including a textbook that can supplement that. In some of our electives, we might find that a textbook isn't the best way to go about using a resource for that particular course. We shy away from textbooks driving their curriculum and have it work the other way around.
Thank you. Mrs. Davey.
Often we will have a study come with recommendations that include resources such as technology and other classroom-related things. Your recommendations are all human capital related. They're all related to staff time being used to write things, to develop things. Could you give us an outline of how that staff time, those resources convert into, our district resources of time and money, as far as, are we going to be doing curriculum writing in the summer? Is it a supplemental cost? Where are you drawing from your existing committee to do work? Is it just how is it going to unfold and look, all the staff time that's going to be devoted to this?
I'll start with K through 8. Probably the most economical way for us to do this is to get substitutes for teachers, and we hate to pull them out of the classroom, but this way, when we do this, we can have the advantage of working with them for a full day. It is really hard to have people come in after teaching a full day and work an hour or two after school, not only because of the commitments that they may have, but just because they don't have a fresh mind, they're drained. If we can have teachers for full days at this level, it's quite possible that we can limit the number of days that we can take them out. And once we get a draft, we're at the point where we can just have electronic communication. That's going to be the hardest part, is getting the draft and having that articulation between the different levels. But at our level, that's how it's going to work for us. And Charles?
I guess I would concur and just kind of add a little bit. Having primarily done the work of curriculum in our collaborative teams, I must say it's an exhaustive and exhausting process. Even though we are meeting twice a week in our core course teams, to come in and focus for 45 minutes on a project that is this large, it ends up not being very efficient. And so the ability to either pull teachers out for a day or two with substitutes for just simply focusing on curriculum development or having summer curriculum hours is really important. Especially as we talk about even finalizing, identifying essential outcomes or power standards and incorporating the core, common core standards. When we start talking about formative assessments and summative assessments that are also in common, to develop a very good, valid, and reliable assessment, that's also something that doesn't just happen in meeting twice a week, even in a month. It could take us a significant amount of time. So that is very important. And mentioning Stevenson, one of the things that I asked them when I visited, there was a panel of teachers that they had there who worked in teams. And one of the questions I asked them is, knowing that they in social studies met on a rotating basis, so that any team member might meet with their team only once every 3 weeks, I said, how do you do the curriculum review, the development of assessments, and look at student data and discuss how you're going to change your instruction? How do you do that on that type of rotational basis, meaning once every 3 weeks? And one of the answers, one of the things they mentioned that they said was significant was that they had the support from their administration and from the board to, when they requested it and needed it, to have these pull-out days and significant chunks of time they could use for professional development, specifically for writing curriculum or writing assessments.
I have one last question, and it's more probably for Dr. Sullivan and Dr. Krizik. About 2 years ago, we got a curriculum review on literacy, and we found that, and I think we knew that our curriculum review cycle, we had pushed that off, and so the literacy review showed 10-year-old plus textbooks. So we certainly weren't happy with that, but I think we kind of knew that was out there. This one, quite honestly, hit me by surprise that it had been 10 years since we had a full review of another curriculum, another subject, if you will. I guess I like two questions. One, are there other subject matters that have lagged behind that we're going to be hit with 8 to 10-year-old reviews and textbooks that we really need to put on the front burner, and have we learned from this the importance of doing this systematically on a 5-year cycle so that we aren't looking at the things that we looked at in this report?
Let me respond in a couple ways. One is with the development of the strategic plan, it really called into attention that we did not have a systemic way of reviewing curriculum. And so we have systematically gone through each of the core content areas, beginning with literacy, because we felt that was critical, and that's the foundation of almost all instruction. When we look at elementary teachers who teach all 4 core content areas, it's almost impossible to simultaneously do curriculum reviews in all the core content areas, because you're pulling the same, because you're doing a K-12 review, pulling the same people, from those areas. And so when we even look at implementation and adoption, you learned last year or earlier this year from Charles Sprandell about concerns with regard to science and looking at science at the elementary level. We know that we cannot have our teachers at the elementary level do 2 major curriculum implementations in a given year. So the question that has to be answered at some point in the very near future is it science that's going to go first to follow the implementation of the middle school science, or is it going to be the social studies once the middle school social studies is reviewed. I think we have a structure in place now, Mrs. Davey, that will prevent that from happening in the core content areas. I think the next step in this process is, as Charles kind of alluded to, is just to, on a systemic basis, look at the courses that are offered at York and put a review cycle in for those courses so that it isn't 5 years or a change in personnel that makes someone look at course realignment, that it should be built in as part of the structure, and it shouldn't be personnel dependent, but there should be a cycle that's developed. So if it was 3 years ago or 4 years ago that we relooked at sequencing those courses, what curriculum writing went along with those that align those with college readiness standards or Common Core standards or both, and what that might look like. So I don't think I think this, Dr. Sullivan, I'll speak for her right now, was a little concerned about even Therese and Charles presenting this presentation to you this evening. But in order for us to move forward, we need to be honest and transparent with the information that we had. So even though it is a little alarming to see so much yellow and red, particularly in that K-8, sequence, and alarming is not meant to minimize that. But until we, again, confront the brutal facts about our reality, we can't move forward. But I believe we have a structure in place now that allows us to continuously confront the brutal facts about what it is that we're delivering to kids. And there are other pieces that Dr. Sullivan has, kind of advocated for, and that is that once power standards can be developed, then we can have common assessments. Because as both Therese has alluded to, we don't necessarily have any data on our, common assessments. The only data that the high school has right now is their AP data. They're probably a little bit further ahead in the development of some common assessments amongst their courses, but we don't have that data to look at yet or to see what that is looking like. And I think when they look at that data, to answer Mr. Collins's question, they can look more at where do we need to help students, support them, to incent them to take AP courses. Where are those areas that students might have concerns with?
I'll just add, as Dr. Krizik said, we've covered the core, starting with literacy. So you've seen literacy, you've seen math, you've seen science, and now you've seen social studies. I do think that we're taking a good look at some of our other coursework, especially at the middle school, in terms of some of our unified arts courses. There are some that haven't been looked at for a long time that you may hear of, so I'll just put that out there right now that we're going to have to take a look at. But otherwise, I think we've covered the main core curriculum areas. And we'll be back at you with, we're already looking at it, it's literacy or math coming up again soon. Math, I think.
Mrs. Conroy.
While it was a little bit hard to see the realities of it, I found the report to be really, really exciting. I think the implementation of the PLCs is going to be fantastic for the entire program. I always remember about 15 years ago, my oldest son asked his principal at Emerson why there's no gifted program for social studies. And I think he would be thrilled about this now. There's a lot of kids that really love social studies, and I think there's a lot of kids that need to be engaged in it at a younger age so that they can understand how broad it is. And it's really exciting. The last couple of years, we just started talking about cross-referencing different classes, and to see the implementation of the English and the social studies, to see that starting to happen. I really want to give Dr. Sullivan credit for really pushing that out there and making that a priority. Then I just have one question, and this is just a professional opinion. I'd like to hear from both of you. I'm curious as to whether you feel there's enough civics being taught within the social studies curriculum throughout the grades, and overall if you think we're in the right place with that.
It's hard to respond at the elementary level. From my understanding and in researching through the report, teachers take advantage of opportunities that they have to involve students in civics opportunities. I think it happens more intentionally at the middle school level because there is a structured time for social studies, and teachers do see that as part of the curriculum. Charles, do you want to comment on high school?
There are a couple of, and this is something that we're still developing, but there are a couple of big ideas or bigger goals that kind of cover all of our courses, particularly the core required courses. One of them is civics. Of course, skills is another one of those. And so the quick answer is in our American government class, we actually have we're using the language of power standards right now, but we call it an essential outcome that is essentially civic engagement. And it kind of creates a target for American government teachers. Now, the teachers in their classrooms have different ways in which they achieve that, but essentially, to meet that outcome, students have to not only learn about a particular issue of their choice, but they have to research the policies at whatever level of government that they're researching that are connected to that particular social or political problem, and then have to either devise a plan to address that particular issue or actively engage in meeting people in the community, either literally or meeting them through some sort of internet method. And so that's probably the area where we see the most specific concentration of addressing not just civic awareness, but civic action. But in our World Studies class and in our U.S. History class, we want to also have a similar civic outcome that's more appropriate to that particular course. So right now in World Studies, we sort of have a course-wide one event each year called the Crop Walk, where there's a week dedicated to researching and studying issues like hunger and poverty in the world, linked to what they are studying at that point in time in their unit. And then there's this event where they all participate in this crop walk on a Friday. And it's in part intended to raise awareness as well as develop a sense of empathy for others. And in the U.S. history, at the U.S. history level, this year is when we are actually rewriting that curriculum. So our intention is to build in a similar civic outcome and have it be appropriate to that course.
Mr. Kralquist.
Thank you for your presentation this evening, for your leadership of this project, and really to all of the staff members, I think 30 plus that were involved in the overall project and study for the time that they devoted. While I think in many respects the study is a good application of what we teach, which is our critical thinking skills, we see the glass is half empty and all the opportunities to be able to improve. I think it is also a good point in time to acknowledge the progress from 2005 that you talked about, and directionally speaking, and when you look at some of the responses in terms of satisfaction levels and, most importantly, the performance levels through the expanded curriculum, that's very encouraging, and now we just need to redouble our efforts. My question is more on a broader point, Dr. Krizik or Dr. Sullivan perhaps, and that is as groups like this do the curriculum review and look at the textbook and best practices, and they bring their subject matter expertise and try to figure out, how do we take our offerings to the next level. There is every time raised the issue that this team has brought up around structurally the constraints, whether it be the need to gather in 45-minute increments, whether it be, whatever it is, the gyrations that one has to go through in order to be able to bring the professionals together to do this kind of quality work. This is heavy lifting, and as mentioned, we have to face the realities. This is if you're burned out or fragged after a full day on your feet supporting students, that may not be the answer. But the answer is also not, as has been, I think, in the case, and it's been a slippery slope. It's not by taking away instructional days from our students. Are there things that have been discussed, perhaps at the cabinet level, at the building levels, that would provide an Uber solution for all these departments that would maybe require the allocation of some resources by the board, by the district for my words, what you described as one approach, which is sort of ad hoc, gathering, or if it's, we have a structural compensation plan that rewards staff members through salary by outside higher education learning. Are there ways that we can channel some of our salary dollars, maybe through the contract, towards investments beyond what the contract would provide? Can you just comment on the array of things that have been considered, are being pursued, or are we kind of locked in a perpetual catch-22 here?
Well, I think we're looking at a variety of things. We're looking at how we're using instructional minutes during the day, particularly at the elementary. I mean, that's always an ongoing evaluation. That's key, and there's discussions being held with regards to that. We're also, having some, we've also had some conversations about how we use professional development time during the school year, the days that we do have, and is there an opportunity to have additional days of professional development days embedded into the school year so that we don't have that forced choice of loss of instructional time versus important collaboration PD time. So, I think those conversations are currently, I'll say, away from the board table because some of those have a lot to do with collective bargaining impact. But I think there is a shared awareness, and I think the teachers, share the similar concern is that they don't necessarily want to be taken out of their classroom to do curriculum writing, but they understand the importance of curriculum writing. So how do we put a calendar and or structure together that can come to a more happy medium than what we currently have? And how then do we look at protecting our professional development time, ensuring that nothing can take away from professional development time once it's embedded in the calendar? And then how do we better communicate the expectations about how to utilize that PD time so that there's clear expectations from the beginning of the year. This is what we're expecting to accomplish by the end of the year, and this is how we're going to use our professional development time. So I do think, and probably we're having these conversations separately, but I think there are a lot of parallel conversations between the teaching staff and the administrative staff, and we're in the process of bringing those conversations together right now.
I have a couple questions, and I think they're more focused on where we go next or how we get there, timeline, cost, and things like that. You've laid out really the things that need to happen. Can you talk just a little bit about the timeline of how you would see these unfolding? I know you've spoken about maybe the middle school curriculum coming first. Mm-hmm. There's about $400,000 of curriculum adoption, 2 pieces, and right. Do you see them both happening next year? Do you think you can get through this all for next year?
I think there are variables that are going to affect the outcome that I don't have the answer to right now, and one of them has already been brought up about what do we see as more urgent to bring on board that new science curriculum for elementary. Mm-hmm. It is not what I would call responsible to ask elementary teachers to take on 2 completely new textbooks to work with for the first time in the same year. So that is going to be something that has an effect, but that does not mean that we can't begin having articulation and meeting time to start writing those power standards. And we can begin as soon as this summer and take advantage of that summer time and get a good head start. And once we get a draft of those power standards, then the other areas that we need to pursue will follow naturally and hopefully at a little bit quicker of a pace. So we're starting with middle school. We're going to start with writing power standards for elementary as soon as possible. And hopefully we'll actually have power standards in place for elementary before we even start looking at any text to review.
Can I just add that we're dodging that just a little bit because we're also looking at when the Common Core science standards are going to come out. And the difference is, those are going to be grade by grade, which is what we're not used to in science. We're used to bands, year bands. And so we don't want to go out and work on science at elementary because if they decide that animals isn't going to happen at first grade, it's going to happen at third, it's very different. So we're waiting. Supposedly, the first draft was supposed to be out already in January. They've already said they've missed their first deadline. So we want to see how close that science roadmap is to make a decision. We'll come forth to you and say whether or not we think that social studies are so far out that we'll be in the next cycle before we get those, national standards. Or whether or not we should go ahead with science. So we are honestly hedging until we see a little bit more what's happening at that level so that we don't make, the wrong choice.
Thank you. Another concept that was sort of woven through the report is that what really would enrich the curriculum is better integration of technology, better integration with some of our literacy programs. Can you talk a little bit about how you see that developing forward from here?
Yeah, as far as the technology, a lot of the publishers now have integrated technology both for the student and for the teacher. So really we're not going to have too many what I would call poor options in reviewing that. And these are things that actually have the examples that I've seen where teachers can immediately access streaming videos to support a concept that's being taught, or have students do role playing through the software that's provided or the online access that the publisher provides. So these are just opportunities to allow students to use these skills that they've already well developed. And in my experience, students find that a fun way to learn as well. So this is not going to be a hard stretch for us. It's something that's already out there, and just the nature of the time that we're in. As far as the literacy, I'll let Charles talk about the high school part. We need to look more closely at Springboard, but from my understanding, there are also many opportunities in Springboard to address social studies content simultaneously with literacy instruction and reading skills. I was really quite surprised when I looked at some samples at the Reading Street how much science and social studies content was in there. And really that's a best practice, learning a language or language skills through content is one of the best ways to teach and have students learn. So we want to use that model as much as possible with what we have already. And Charles, do you want to speak about high school?
Yeah, I would just say I'm always a little cautious when we talk about technology because I sense that sometimes we think that technology is an end in itself, and it's really a means by which we want to achieve some bigger ideas and some bigger skill development. I mean, ultimately, when it comes down to it, reading is reading. Having said that, though, I would say there are so many opportunities out there, at least at the high school level, in which we can use technology to enrich what we're doing, but also to provide students with the experiences with technology that they will likely be using at the undergraduate level. So I know there are a couple things right now that we're exploring in the social studies department, and that is, for example, using iClickers in our classes to supplement what we're trying to do in terms of formative assessments so that teachers can immediately provide feedback in the same class period to students in areas right now you're not understanding this particular concept because we can see on a graph on a PowerPoint, not a PowerPoint, but on our projected screens that 75% of you did not understand this concept. So I see that as a very practical tool. Now they're expensive. A class set is usually somewhere between $1,300 and $1,700. But I see that as something that if it's used well, teachers could use it every period of the day, probably several times a week. There's some software that allows you to do a lot of peer assessment. And there's one group that I'm talking to right now that I'd like to pilot their particular software where students, as part of their assignment, upload something that they wrote, and then 5 or 6 of their peers log on to this software site, and then they have a rubric or a scale by which they then comment on their peers' work. And there's a lot of research that supports that type of assessment obviously is not just beneficial for the student who's being assessed by their peers, but for the actual students who are doing the assessment. So a lot of this is simply having the access to this to these different opportunities, and also making sure that we don't have too many obstacles in place to use the internet and other resources that are out there on the internet.
Thank you. I have one final question, and I think it's like Sorry, one final question, and it's more overall. I mean, one of the weaknesses, deficiencies that was identified, and I think it was more through the K through 8, was that the curriculum doesn't really provide opportunities on the social emotional learning standards, and that isn't something that I recall seeing in some of the other studies. Is this a new requirement to implement this in our curriculum, and are we going to have to address these standards in the other areas of the curriculum?
Illinois is one of the only states that has social emotional learning standards. There's only 3 of them, but they're pretty big. And I don't, off the top of my head, remember what year those came into be, but it was well after the last time we've looked at social studies curriculum. So in general, that is the spot where most districts have looked to incorporate some of those standards. So there are other curriculum areas where we can incorporate some of those standards, but in general, we want to look at social studies.
Thank you. We appreciate, again, the time of the entire group that was involved in this and the great job you've done bringing it forth to us. As far as the next discussion, the next steps on here, I know you've talked a little bit about some uncertainty there, but what would we expect or timing as far as a recommendation coming forth?
We'll probably definitely talking to you about middle school, planning for budgeting for a middle school adoption for the next school year. And like I said, we're awaiting in the next month or so to kind of get a better feel for where we're at with science, to make a decision as to whether or not we go with science elementary first, which is what I can tell you that our principal preferences, and from what we've talked to our elementary curriculum liaisons, that's their preference. We just want to be thoughtful that we don't go ahead with something and then have, curriculum standards come out right after that don't align. So we want to be responsible with that decision. So we're going to hold off until we can make a good decision about whether to go with social studies or science first at the elementary level.
Mr. Ovando, Mrs. Ulrich, thank you again for your time tonight. We appreciate it, and you can stay for the rest of the meeting if you'd like, or you can leave.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our next item on our agenda is we have a couple of policy manual items that we still need to get closure on. I think these are our last 2 significant items before we have our policy manual substantially complete. Ms. Hirsch is not able to join us tonight, but she has worked with Mrs. Walsh and given us a couple options as far as these policies. So we'll first talk about policy 610. And again, we've touched on both of these previously. We've got prior versions. In some cases, these are coming back through discussion because of press updates and the other situation, it's because we didn't really come to a consensus on the language on one. So we're going to talk first about policy 6:10, which is you know what, I'm going to reverse that. We're going to start with the other one first. We'll start with 8:10, which is the connection with the community. And we have been given basically 3 options here. We had an original version that we had looked at previously. We had an IASB version. And we now have a third option, which combines the two and add some of the dimensions of the IASB version to the original one we had looked at. So I will leave it up to get input from the board. In regards to this, my initial recommendation is that we start focusing with option 3, which I think is a more comprehensive policy. So I'm open to hearing any input or recommendations that board members have on this. Mrs. Davey.
I think option 3 did exactly what we wanted to have done, and I think, Malia, you helped with that, and I think you did a fabulous job. So I want to thank you for the work you put into that. And from one board member standpoint, I'm good with 3.
Mrs. Conroy.
I agree with Mrs. Davey. Malia, thank you so much for pulling it all together for us. I know that wasn't easy. I fully support 3.
Mr. Collins.
I like option 3 as well.
Okay, I'm seeing by a nod of the heads. Mrs. Steroni and Mr. Carlquist are also good with options 3. And again, thank you, Ms. Smith, for the time you put into this. I'm just going to throw out just one idea, and we can put this away. But one of the items in the IASB version, which isn't really quite in here, and maybe it doesn't belong in this policy section, is their item number 3, to secure adequate financial support for a sound educational program. And we talk some about just making sure we're communicating with the community, that they're understanding our initiatives, policies, and so forth. But what we don't really talk anywhere in here about creating an understanding of what our fiscal resources are, what our fiscal needs are, and I guess I would be open to any board members' reactions to that. I mean, I would suggest something about providing clear communication of fiscal needs and resources, or something to that end. Mrs. Davey.
My initial reaction is when you look at the third option, the number 3 bullet, it's incorporated in there. It talks about the educational program as a whole. It talks about operations. So I guess I feel like it's covered.
Mr. Collins, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm not sure we need to spell it out as articulately as the IASB version does. I think if we develop value, or if we deliver value to the people of Elmhurst, they will support what this Board of Education recommends.
I'm fine with that. I just wanted to throw it out there as a suggestion. I again assumed if it was incorporated anywhere, it was in that higher theme. Mr. Carlquist.
Yeah, the other thought, why I think at least it may be appropriate to exclude that explicit statement, is that oftentimes I think, and I think it's a misunderstanding, but I think oftentimes there's a conclusion drawn that a community relations program is for the sole purpose of trying to seek public support for further funding and investment in the school system, as opposed to saying we want to take the resources that the community has given us and try to maximize the value and have good open dialogue and engagement and the like. And so I think there's value in excluding that explicit statement.
Okay, I think we have conclusion on that. So, Ms. Smith, thank you very much for your work in helping us bring these two together. And I'm going to thank, in her absence, Ms. Hirsch and Ms. Walsh and the Policy Committee for the work that they've done. So we are down to one. And our last, and I think this one is going to be a little bit more involved in discussion, but our last policy is 6:10, and that's the educational philosophy and objectives. And when we spoke about this, and it was quite a while ago, what we talked about was really making this more personal to our district, more in sync with our mission statement, our vision statement. So we have two options that are laid out here. Option 1 is really from our old policy manual, and option 2 is pretty different. This one comes from the IASB. So I'm going to put these two out there. I'm not. We had asked board members to give input as far as what kinds of things they'd like to see in this statement. So I'm going to start, I guess, with our original version and ask for input as far as acceptance of that versus what's not in there that's in this additional version from the press update. Mrs. Davey.
I think we're all acutely aware of the need to have a policy manual ready to adopt with a timeline. You know, there are a lot of reasons we need to do this within the next month. Our educational audit being one of the main ones. So I'm disappointed that we weren't able to come up with our own new one, because I think that was what we all hoped for, but I think that all of our plates have been very full. So the work that we put into this policy manual has, we've already put a yeoman's effort into the work that we already are going to be adopting. I wonder if we can't put policy 610 on a front burner of one of the first things that we revisit, or that the policy committee revisits after the adoption of this. So the next time that they convene, if we could request that they look at this with the critical eye of making it our own new educational philosophy and objectives. But in the meantime, I would suggest we use our own one, rather than option 2, which is an IASB boilerplate one. I would suggest just to be able to put the whole policy manual in a package with a pretty bow on it. We go ahead and use our old one, and then at the same time ask our policy committee to know that it's important for us to revisit this when they reconvene. That's just a suggestion.
Mr. Carlquist.
I support that. I think as a district, we will be experiencing a significant leadership change in a very short period of time. And I think through the bulk of the work that's gone on over the last 3.5 years with the policy manual, I think this board has done the heavy lifting of revising, reviewing, revising, and shortly adopting the policy revisions. But this one in particular, and again, I'm not looking to pass off work, because I think, frankly, this is an ideal place for a new Board of Education with new superintendent leadership to start with, both in terms of making the educational philosophy and objectives their own, but just as an activity to reach a meeting of the minds of a leadership group of 8 to really reflect what insights and learning and feedback that they've received from the community through an election process, and letting this be the last, but symbolically the first imprint on the policy manual going forward. So I think this would be, out of all the work that we've done, an ideal place for that group to begin.
Mrs. Conroy.
I agree with Mr. Carlquist. I think that we should go with our original version, because I think that is something we can leave with the new board, and they can discuss that. And I think it's a valuable exercise for a new board and a new superintendent to spend time discussing what they think are the most important things that this district does.
Mrs. Duroni and Mr. Collins, are you open to that as a go-forward approach for this?
Yes.
Okay, and I'll just tell you from my discussions with Ms. Hirsch, I think that was also where she was assuming was the best way to proceed with this. So I think the policy we have in here is a good one. It's not great, and what we were trying to do was make everything great. I mean, I would agree. We spent a tremendous amount of time on this policy manual. And again, I'm sorry Ms. Hirsch isn't here to say, we're going to put the stamp on it and make this ready to move forward so that we can go with our first reading of the policy manual. So I would like to thank the board and Dr. Krizik and the entire cabinet for the tremendous amount of work that has been put forth on this effort. I'm going to say it's been about 1.5 years of time and countless hours spent on this. So our last 2, we're going to proceed with this as written, and allow the new board to revisit this and use the information we're going to get from the community surveys and so forth, as well as what we have available in the strategic plan to build something going forward. So we are done with our policy manual review, and we will look for our first reading coming forth. Our next item on our agenda is discussion about high school and middle school graduation and promotion dates. Dr. Krizik, would you like to give us some background?
This is really a great pivot off of some of the conversation we just had a little while ago at the board table in terms of the use and looking at our school year and our school time and having a level of rigor. We have, Ms. Smith is here this evening, and I'll ask her to come up shortly. We really wanted to kind of have a conversation with what our middle school promotion ceremony and what high school graduation, may or may not be looking like going forward. I'm going to briefly just give you the overview on the middle school piece, and I think we'll probably be spending more time on the high school piece. The purpose of tonight, I think, is really to ask a lot of different questions to gain a perspective, not necessarily give a direction, because our process has always been to have a preliminary discussion here at the table and then to determine the course of action we'll be taking. Just as a reminder, we made some shifts in the middle school promotion ceremony last year. We moved to having more of a focus on students and less of a focus on adults, and that is a focus that all three middle school principals would like to maintain going forward. Historically or traditionally, we have looked to try to schedule the middle school graduations either the day before the last day of school, traditionally closer to the last day of school, so they can kind of optimize all of the instructional days they have available for students. The strategy that we also utilized last year is we announced a tentative date to parents sometime about this time last year, indicating to parents that we would confirm that date right prior to the spring break in the event that we used any emergency days that extended the school year by several days. And the middle school principals felt that they received a lot of positive feedback with regards to that communication strategy and would like to go forward and do that same strategy. In the spirit of that, our last official day of school this upcoming year is Wednesday, June 1st. That is the week of Memorial Day. So Monday is the holiday, the 30th, and the 31st is a Tuesday. As you know, we also moved the location of some of the graduations. Sandberg and Bryan both held their commencement or promotion ceremonies in the green and white gym. There was a desire to keep the field house as the more I'll say the sacred place for the high school graduation and not to marry those two. So a proposal going forth from the middle school principals is to hold the Sandberg Middle School promotion ceremony on Thursday evening, May 26th, with the students returning for an all-day activity the following day, and then to hold the Bryan and Churchville Middle School promotion ceremonies on Friday, which was the same day it was held last year. They held them the Friday before the Memorial Day weekend last year. Most of us, the majority of us, were at those ceremonies, so we know that. And Churchville, at this point in time, continues to prefer to hold theirs in their gymnasium at this point in time. And then the Bryan promotion ceremony would be held in the Dick Campbell Gymnasium at York the night following the Sandberg graduation. All three middle schools would have the same number of days of student attendance. In essence, our eighth graders would have less than a day and a half of time away from school as they conclude their eighth grade year. So I just kind of wanted to share with you that's their intent and overview. Should we add even one day, emergency day, those days would shift to Tuesday and Wednesday the following week. And that would be the plan of the middle schools. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so there wasn't really a lot of options as it related to the middle school. It just kind of is, again, optimizing instructional time and trying to make sense so there's some continuity amongst the three middle schools. At this time, I'd like to ask Diana Smith to come up to the podium. She had shared with you some background information on the commencement program at York High School, and I thought it might be good for her to kind of give that overview at this meeting and then engage in kind of a dialogue.
Do you want me to go through this? Okay. So I think you have a copy of a memo that I sent to the board earlier in the week. And we talk a little bit about kind of the history. The recommendation from the York administration is Sunday, May 22nd. And I think I describe in the memo what we believe administratively, and the department chairs certainly as well, believe that the current model of allowing students to get out of school, the seniors to get out a few days early, accomplishes a number of things. This year's schedule complicates our options somewhat by the day that we get out of school, the Memorial Day weekend, and so forth. So without going through and reading it, we recommend is Sunday, May 22nd. It provides us with a space of time that the seniors are out of the building. We have time to validate the graduates, the graduating class. We have a nice atmosphere for our underclassmen as they take their finals. Keep in mind that up until a few years ago, we didn't have senior finals, something that's made us very popular with the kids. We put that into place for the seniors. So what we do, which has turned out, I think, very well, is that we have a double day of senior finals. And we go into a block schedule just for the seniors, but the rest of the classes also are in block schedule. So the underclassmen get to have a review session or extra time for presentations and things like that during the final exam days for seniors. And one of the things I mention in here is that I think it's hard to sort of appreciate the importance of having a quiet, peaceful, academic, highly academic end to the school year, and it's something that I think we have at York. I think it's, but the combination of holding finals for seniors, also having some quiet for the underclassmen has served us well. And those are the primary reasons why we recommend May 22nd, and keeping in mind that we also, in the initial feedback, very limited, but the initial feedback we received from parents, they like having a weekend day for their graduation. The people that we talked to, for the most part, did not think that Memorial Day was as desirable for the graduation day, although I'm certain that that's something that the board, if you decide to shift to that we would certainly communicate and work with families on. The other options, we talk about the option of having the seniors stay until the last day of school, take their finals with the underclassmen, and then hold commencement on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday of the last week. This would maximize the number of days that the seniors are in school. Because, however, the last full day of finals is tentatively scheduled for Friday, May 27th. We would need to either hold commencement over Memorial Day weekend or possibly the next week, at which time, and I talk a little bit later on about the impact of trying to ask the staff to come back as well. We could move all of our students' finals back to the Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of our last week of school and hold commencement that Friday evening. So if we went Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we could hold commencement Friday evening, May 27th. But that means that we've held finals, and then we have a couple days while students are still in school, and that's not as desirable, especially at the end of the year, to have 2,600 kids in the building with no structured activities such as final exams, plus you have students who are just waiting for graduation. So I would say administratively that probably would not be optimal. We could also leave the underclassmen finals where they are, move the senior finals to Monday and Tuesday, the 23rd and 24th, and graduate our seniors on the 26th. I don't think we think it's very advantageous to hold a graduation in the middle of the week during final exams for underclassmen because we have so many siblings that would want to come. It's also the interruption to teachers during a time when they're grading, but also the orchestra members who also would be impacted. We identified as an option to hold commencement the weekend after the last date on the calendar, which is currently June 8th. But with a very real possibility that if we do not use our emergency days, the staff will have finished the week before, and that's a concern to us that I think that would be difficult for families who want to plan to have some type of break between the end of the school year and the start of summer school and summer camps, but also that we expect we utilize between 80 and 90 staff members to help with graduation. So that's an additional factor. I also provided information that we gathered from neighboring schools and school districts about their last day for seniors, whether or not they offer senior finals, the day of their commencement, last day for underclassmen, and that number of days in between. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if I could.
Okay. I actually have a couple questions. when you look at the survey of the other schools, less than half of them have the week gap. So for the school districts that are able to, have the 3-4 days, not a full week, how are they managing some of these conflicts?
Which conflicts?
Some of the concerns that you expressed about having less than the week between the graduation date and the completion of finals.
When we solicited this information, we pulled a lot of it from calendars. I emailed the other principals in the West Suburban Conference as well. And I think part of it is, I think it's a combination of things. It's that people have traditions set up in their school districts where they've done it a certain way. And also, I think I would tell you that when I have conversations with the West Suburban Conference principals about our experience at the end of the year, I'm hearing a lot more from other schools about the disruption, the pranks, oftentimes things like vandalism and things like that. I really do feel that there is some value to having that amount of time. We certainly could shift to something, as some of the suggestions from some of the other school districts, but in terms of answering specifically to talk about what Downers does or something like that, I couldn't do that.
And I guess I have my first daughter. She's going to fall over in her grave when she finds out that I'm talking about messing with the graduation date. So hopefully she's not paying attention tonight. But
she will be.
My question, I guess this was the first time I really thought about it, because I've had an underclassman before, that there's two sets of finals. Because there are a lot of classes where, I could tell you my daughter's a senior, she has classes where there are sophomores and so forth in it.
Sure.
So we really have two full sets of finals at the high school. And could you just talk a little bit about, is that common with some of these other schools? Is that, standard practice? Is that best practice?
I'd like to tell you it's the best practice, but I think when you talk about two sets of finals, we don't have that at first semester. We have it second semester only. And the reason why we do that is that based on needing to verify the results of the senior finals, we need to hold the finals. We need to let the teachers grade them, get the grades turned into the counselors, do the verification and those type of things. So sort of the way our current schedule is set up, with the faculty staying generally only 1 day or so after the last final exam, you can see where it creates some, if you need to have 48 to 72 hours after the last final, it really necessitates either you hold your teachers or expect them to come back. That's the other option, is to expect them to come back. Or you have your finals early and then you have some lag time between your last day and your graduation day. And I think, we feel like it's pretty important to hold the kids and keep the kids, in school and taking finals up until the last day of the underclassmen.
Thank you. Mr. Collins?
Just on the subject of finals for for last semester seniors, if you could just shed some light for me on the rationale as to, we're not the only one doing it. It seems like the majority of the high schools do it. It just seems, from my perspective, these kids have worked really hard. The ones that are going on to college, which is most of them, are already accepted.
Deserve a break.
I'm just thinking, if you're happy with your grade, maybe they go right up to the day before final start for the underclassmen, and that's when their year ends. And would that also take the certification process? Would that make it shorter? Would that help us?
I guess on your first point, I think that when we talk about wanting to be a high-achieving school district and preparing students for college, I really do think that it's critically important of any of our kids that our seniors in their second semester are taking an important high-stakes culminating exam, because that's going to replicate what they're going to have their first semester of college. So I actually believe they're probably the most important group of kids to take a final exam. And what we're trying to shift to a little bit in the second semester, particularly in the senior year, is to replicate college, what it looks like. So there's less emphasis on homework, extra credit, projects, and things like that, and really start preparing the kids. We also believe that final exams are an important culminating experience. It's important for students to hold on to their information, to learn how to review, to be prepared to be able to respond in a variety of ways to the information that they've learned. So I really do feel that it's not the time to let up and say you shouldn't take a final exam, because we need to sort of, build in that kind of reward. And I would say if any reward is built in, quite honestly, it's letting them go a couple days early. And our kids have really, I think, responded well to that. They're appreciative of it. They're not storming out of the building. They seem to be in really good spirits when they leave on the last day of finals. They don't love taking the finals, but that was a few years ago. That was the tough year. And I think, Mrs. Ostajek, your daughter, I don't think she was there when we weren't giving finals. So I think we've finally reached the point where all the kids assume that they're going to have finals as seniors. I really do think that's an important experience for them. I'd also mention that for a lot of the AP classes, the kids have taken AP exams. And so for those students, they do some other activities. Many of them do other activities in the AP courses, like projects and things like that, and presentations, additional research, and things like that. So they're not asked to take a double final. Mm-hmm. And you may notice that with some of the schools, most of the schools give senior finals. Some of the schools offer it only to the students who are in danger of failing a class. So that's common. At New Trier, they don't do a senior final. They do a senior project, which is really a great concept, sort of a culminating project that they do with an advisor. And then I'm familiar with one school, and I don't think I have it on here, LT, where I think for all their students, they give them the option to opt out of one final exam based on perfect attendance. So there are a number of different ways that schools kind of reward kids at the end.
Mrs. Conroy.
This won't make me popular with my two younger sons, but I strongly agree that they need to have finals senior year. I have two older sons who went through the system, and anybody who has kids who have graduated from high school are familiar with the senior slide philosophy that kids tend to get senior year. And I think it's really important. I agree there could be other options, perhaps a senior project or whatever, but I think they need to be accountable at the end of their senior year, and I think they need to take pride in their grades and understand that that's a philosophy that they need to take into their college education.
I do like the senior project idea. I mean, New Trier is really known, I think, all over, the country for that type of senior project. A lot of the people that work up there do presentations on the senior project, and it's something that we have talked a little bit about with the faculty and some with the students. But it's a really interesting idea.
And that might be something that fits into some categories better than to others, and so maybe certain areas would like to look into that. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Can I ask you about that senior project?
Mr. Collins, point of order. Mr. Carlquist is next, and then we'll defer to you. Sorry.
Ms. Smith, could you comment how much, if at all, the recommendation is predicated on the way the calendar falls with the holiday weekend? And have you looked out, which I know is difficult because the calendars aren't built for years out into the future, but I'm wondering the extent to which the recommendation is related to many of the things you pointed out in your memo, which is, I'll say, the inconvenience to students and families, just the logistical challenge of the holiday weekend.
Yeah, I think this year is a little bit unique, sort of the way that the Memorial Day weekend falls, and there have been years in the past where we have had final exams, for example, that go Friday, Monday, Tuesday, or something like that, and take us into the next week. Then I think trying to sort of read, as we look ahead to future years and based on the feedback from the board, we can certainly look at some other alternatives. We felt this year there really weren't a lot of options. And, certainly I think, our first concern needs to be holding students, providing a strong academic atmosphere, instructional experience for all kids up through the end of the year. The best that we can, including giving them senior finals. But I also think this is one of those things that really is a tradition in Elmhurst to hold a weekend graduation. I think families really like to be able to plan ahead. So I do think it's important to get the date out as early as we can when the board approves it, because I think parents really do want to make arrangements for family to come in and things like that. And I think it's sort of a tradition in town. It certainly could be shifted, as all things can, We didn't used to give senior finals, and we shifted that. But in terms of the family experience, I do think that's something that families are used to in Elmhurst, and they like. And I think it really works pretty well as well. And in terms of moving it to Memorial Day weekend, if that's a decision that you decide, I think it's a matter of getting that out early. One of the things parents have talked about is that a lot of people travel in Elmhurst. A lot of parents travel that weekend. And the way it is, as you mentioned, this year, is that it would probably mean that most kids would be done prior to that, and then we're asking really students and parents to kind of stay over, which I think is kind of tough to do.
Dr. Krizik is going to speak to the calendar, and then Mr. Collins.
Mr. Carlquist, as you know, we have always done a 2-year rolling out calendar, so we already have 11-12 calendars completed. And we have a similar end date in 11-12. We're either ending on that Tuesday or Wednesday following Memorial Day. And the shift of accomplishing the goal of having first semester finals before the winter break is going to continue to shift to have our school year end right either slightly thereafter Memorial Day. The only way that would change significantly is if we added a significant number of days somehow onto the calendar. That also can be reduced by reducing the number of days during the winter break in order to continue to balance that ending time right around the Memorial Day. So going forward, even though we don't have a calendar past the 11-12 school year, we have projected that out in the calendar committee, and we're pretty much always ending a day or two after Memorial Day. So it's always going to be an issue that middle school is going to look at going forward, and it's always going to be a going forward issue that the high school is going to have to look at as well.
Mr. Collins.
Dr. Krizik, you just answered my question I was going to ask you about the 11-12 school year. So if this looks like it's a chronic challenge going forward, Smith, I just wanted to ask you more about the concept of the senior project. Are they individual projects? Is it one project per student, or is it multiple projects one for each class per student? Mm-hmm. Can you provide a little more detail?
I can. I mean, I've listened to, I've actually seen a couple of the presentations, and I think they're a combination of things that the kids can do. They design their own projects, and there are some that are done, many that are done individually and others that are done in partners. And it's really, what's key to it is that the kids establish a relationship with one faculty member. There are a number of faculty sponsors because they have an advisory, sort of a homeroom program set up there that you may be familiar with, where all of the kids at New Trier have an advisor, a faculty advisor, who has one period of their day devoted to sort of having a homeroom experience with the kids. And so at the end of their 4 years, they develop a proposal based on their own interest. And for some kids, that's related to service, to a service club that they're involved in, maybe attached to some career opportunity that they're looking into. It may be tied to an academic class that they've enjoyed or pursued, a track that they've pursued. And so they actually create a proposal and do that in conjunction, kind of in collaboration with a faculty member, and then they do there are a number of things that they do, but one of the things is almost like a senior fair where the kids give presentations and community members are invited in, and underclassmen and things like that. So kids say they love it.
And I understand that part of this is what I'll call a crowd control issue with the senior prank and trying to deter that. Would that project achieve that same goal? Can't remember what my senior prank was, but I seem to remember we had.
I bet you didn't have one.
Oh, I don't know.
That wasn't the year they brought 3 pigs and numbered them, and no, that wasn't your year.
No.
I don't think. I think it depends on, again, keeping in mind that whenever the graduation date is, has to be backed up so that whenever the final project is turned in and graded, that's done with enough time to give an opportunity for the administration to verify. So if you're asking if they were doing a senior project, would that calm the atmosphere of the building down? I guess we'd have to think about that quite a bit. There's so many things that are involved. When are they working? When are they presenting? How is it graded? When is it graded? Those kind of things.
And would the senior project take the logistical difficulty that it looks like it is going to go forward for many years would that help that logistical difficulty with when to have graduation and keeping kids in school for a few more days?
Well, I guess, to think about the senior project a little bit, there still is a component of presenting, which I guess is a way to think about it is it's sort of the examination as well.
Right.
So unless you can't really have the faculty involved in the presentations and the examinations and so forth if they're also administering exams to underclassmen. So I would say those two things, I would think those would need to be separated. And I just think realistically with 600 kids, this would be spread out over a period of time, and if there's an all-school opportunity, that would have to be something that was done certainly earlier in the week or the week before. And I really don't know the mechanics of how the calendar is set up, but I could certainly, we could look into that. It's something that we've talked about before.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm not hearing from any board members that they're not willing to support the day given the discussion. I think the general sense is just that we'd like to look at creative options for the future and to try to close the gap of the week. But this isn't an action item that you'd require from us tonight. However, I think the point of the presentation was to at least get a sense of where the board was at. Am I getting any different feedback from the board? Okay. All right. So thank you for Dr. Krizik for bringing that and giving us the opportunity to try to understand that. We're spending a lot of time trying to enhance our curriculum and increase instructional time, and losing the week was something we really needed to understand. So, again, whatever opportunities we have in the future to try to find creative ways to close that gap a little bit would be great. So we're going to move on. We have upcoming meetings, unless there's anything else. So we have no action items coming out of tonight. It was all of our items were informational. We have two scheduled meetings to announce. Tuesday the 25th, which is our regular Board of Education meeting here at 7:30. And then following that, Tuesday, February 8th, we have a workshop meeting. Again, one of our normal meetings scheduled here. I'm going to announce just a couple of additional dates. We are going to hold some focus groups and just trying to get input from the community and building just a profile on opinion of the school district strengths, things like that. There's two dates, January 14th, which is this Friday, Field Elementary School, which is at the corner of North Avenue in Emroy, 295 Emroy. There'll be two sessions from 1 to 2 and from 2 to 3. All community members, stakeholders, anybody interested in coming and giving input, we encourage you to come. The second scheduled date is Tuesday, January 18th, and it'll be at York High School in the Yorker Room. And we have three sessions, one from 4 to 5, one from 5 to 6, and one from 6 to 7. We also encourage all to go to the district website. There's a link for a Survey Monkey, and we're really, really interested in getting input from all of our stakeholders. So that is announcements on dates and meetings. Are there any board communications? Mrs. Deroni?
I just wanted to know, the survey, I thought we were going to see it before it got put up and went out, and the letter that went with it, and all of a sudden it was there. Did I miss that email, or did other board members get to approve the survey, or what was happening with that?
We had a very short window to do the survey, so I compared it to my notes with what Linda had, and it was consistent with what I thought the comments we had were. So if there are any changes we'd like to make to it, it's easy to make that change. It wouldn't affect people that have already taken it, but it's just the very short. When we shortened our time frame, we had to get it out as quickly as possible in order to offer the most people the opportunity to give input on it. So that's really where that came from. Seeing that there are no other board communications, we have completed our agenda for this evening, so I will accept a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mrs. Conroy. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Collins. All in favor? Those opposed? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.